Because I was in limbo last year.
Participatory budgeting was considered by the members of our organization as an opportunity to maintain hope and to continue to believe that although we as poor people living in poor condition in our cities, there is a way to bring change. Participatory budgeting was considered as an opportunity and as a hope. The people I talk about after told me that it's not possible. We cannot do participatory budgeting in Cameroon because Cameroon has a long tradition of centralization. The central power is, the government is there since 35 years. So political parties, civil society organizations, churches have been fighting to bring change, but nothing happened. And I found participatory budgeting as a way because participatory budgeting was founded on 3 principles. The first one was to give the floor to the population. In our country, there's no spaces to talk. Decisions are taken within the ministry, within the municipality without consulting population. That was the first thing that makes me hope that there is a way, if we work on participatory budgeting, if we promote participatory budgeting in our society, maybe something can change. Give the floor to citizens, to youth, to the women, to poor people in poor neighborhood. The second thing was that the fact that participatory budgeting was not only an tool to give the floor, but also to make change. For the first year, there is the deliberation. People asking about water, and 2-3 years after, there is water. And lastly, the issue of information, transparency, and communication between the authority, the citizens, and the contractors. Participatory budgeting was seen as a tool, a strategy to tackle the 2 main challenges that our country is facing since 15 years. Firstly, the poverty, and secondly, the corruption. More than 60% of public resources in Cameroon are lost in the corruption. And we were sure that if we bring people within the framework of the elaboration of policies, of the implementation of policies, if we create some spaces that can enable citizens to follow up what decision makers are doing, maybe something can change. Economic change, that means for us employment. More of us, when we started, were youth without employment, and I think 30% of youth in Cameroon have no work. We are talking about income activities, income generative activities. We are talking about less corruption, and specifically in public contract. That's what we call economic change. We are talking about social change. That means more inclusion, for inclusion of women, of youth, of people living in poor neighborhood. We're talking also about the free speech, because sometimes we fear to take the floor because the authority can be violent. But if you are taking the floor within the spaces that mobilize a lot of people, you cannot fear, you can speak. And maybe that speech can bring something new in your life. In Yaoundé 6, for example, when we start the participatory budget in 2008, in a neighborhood called Kobikok, where 1,000 of families are living, there were no road, no water supply, and there was also no opportunity given to citizens to be informed, for example, on the amount of the budget of the municipality. And other thing which is very important, when we launched the participatory budget in Yaoundé 6, 2008, it was the first time for the mayor to go from his office to that neighborhood and concretely have a view on the situation in which the population is living. And I remember the word he pronounced after that visit. The mayor said, it seemed like we are not in Cameroon. If somebody come to my office to talk to me that people are living in this condition before, I would have said it is not true. But now, I think there is need to do something.
I just wondered whether, I know that Cameroon is a very resource-rich country, and I would imagine that quite a percentage of state revenues come from the exploitation of oil and other natural resources. And I wonder to what extent the fact that if you have a government that can rely on, receiving a lot of revenue from one sector of the economy and hence doesn't have to maybe worry about trying to raise revenues from other types of taxation, whether there's a correlation between that and the government's openness to the idea of being, more, or having more participation in discussions about budget processes.
Last year also we did an assessment on the use of taxes with that platforms, and we found that less than 10% of citizens of the economic actors in Cameroon pays taxes, and sometimes it states, as we are talking, doesn't make a lot of effort to mobilize those resources, because natural resources are very important and easy to collect for them. So what we are doing now is to sensitize population on the link between their own financial contribution and the response that they can wait from the state.
I've been in this business 40 years, and you finally come to realize that in urban areas, if you don't get local government right, if you don't get civil society active, if you don't get the two working together, there's very little possibility of development. And if we look at the history of London, or history of New York, or the history of local government in North America, it's all around citizens organizing, pressurizing, making demands, getting more accountability, getting more transparency, and pretty much all the key social legislation around water and sanitation and drainage and access to healthcare and schools, and even getting the vote, are all around strong civil society. I love the comment by one of the facilitators of PB in Yaoundé. For local development plans to succeed, we need the municipalities alongside, not for funding, but as an institutional partner. Local development and maintaining new infrastructure are technically their responsibility as they receive taxes and funding from the state. In reality, the municipalities do nothing, but they must be involved. Even the smallest projects need the approval from the government delegate, Yaoundé's mayor of mayors, if you like, because he controls the city plan. If you don't get approval from him, you might find your project is demolished to make way for something in the city plan. So participatory budgeting helps to build and strengthen relationships within communities, helps build relationship with local government. But what scares me is that if we look at the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals, I'm sure most of you are monitoring the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals. They're being discussed at the moment. A new draft has just come out, and these will guide development assistance and national government commitments for up to 2030. So have huge importance. Please go and read them. The local doesn't exist. It's all about what national government does and international agencies do. It's not around what local government does. Yet if you look at all the commitments they make, commitment to universal provision for clean water, commitment to universal provision for sanitation, for drainage, for healthcare, for schools, for the rule of law, for an identity card, for engagement with government, almost all of those depend on local government. The 300 homeless women in Harare who formed a savings group and they established a collective bank, and they started negotiating with the city of Harare. And they were allocated a plot of land that wasn't the greatest location, but it was much better than where they were living. And the municipality were going to charge them $18,000, which was for plotting and putting in the basic infrastructure. And they wanted a loan for $18,000 because they wanted to pay back. That is the nightmare of any international agency, and I'll stand corrected because first of all it's a very small amount of money that needs a lot of oversight to make sure it works, and then you're getting paid back in Zimbabwean currency, which any financial management would so in a sense all the funding agencies are pushed with staffing cuts to get rid of a lot of money, which makes it very difficult for them to have the relationship with civil society groups whose needs are quite modest. So to me, the big issue is how can we fund competent, capable local governments, and how can we fund competent and capable civil society groups who together and collectively in partnership can deliver development. And that does need rethinking of financial instruments.